Watch Dr. Drew's new show at 9 on HLN. Weeknights on HLN.
We got a lot to go through, and it pertains to a case that people have been talking about all day, and words such as shocking and surprising, when these things kind of throw you. But in the case of Casey Anthony, those words are not strong enough. There were allegations of sexual abuse, lying, and betrayal that surfaced today before the testimony even began. But first, let us go back to how the story unfolded almost 3 years ago. It's hard to imagine. It's been 3 years. Watch this, then we'll talk.
Police desperately searching for a beautiful little girl, Kaylee. She was last seen 5 long weeks ago. So why hasn't Mommy called the police?
Why is she being arrested?
Tot mom Casey Anthony behind bars. A 7-count indictment.
Well, someone just said that Kaylee was dead this morning, that she drowned in the pool. That's the newest story out there. Surprise, surprise.
Potentially the big break police have been waiting for in the disappearance of 3-year-old Florida girl Caylee Anthony. Skeletal remains of a small child. Investigators say it is 3-year-old Caylee.
Well, it's compelling stuff, and we've seen this thing unfold in real time. But I got to say, I'm not that surprised by the allegations today. I've been saying all along that it felt like Casey was a sexual abuse survivor. The lying, the chaos, the drugs and alcohol, that's the kind of behavior we often see in a sexual abuse survivor. In fact, I started wondering if she had something called dissociative disorder, where she didn't know sometimes what she was doing, or some part of her was disconnected to the point where she really couldn't keep up with all her lies. She certainly lies, there's no doubt about that. Now, Casey Anthony is charged with murdering her 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee. Joining us to talk about what happened today are criminal defense attorney Allison Triesel. We also have Ryan Smith and Jean Cazares, both with our In Session, our sister network on True TV. Defense attorney Jose Baez dropped this bombshell this morning that Kaylee allegedly drowned in the family swimming pool. So watch this now.
How in the world can a mother wait 30 days before ever reporting her child missing? It's insane. It's bizarre. Something's just not right about that. Well, the answer is actually relatively simple. She never was missing. Kaylee Anthony died on June 16, 2008, when she drowned in her family's swimming pool.
All right, then the defense made a shocking claim that Casey's father, George Anthony, knew about the drowning and was complicit in helping hide his granddaughter's body. And I want to remind people that we were talking about sexual abuse a few minutes ago, but these are all allegations. Nobody knows really what the truth is here. But let's see this tape about George Anthony's participation.
As soon as Casey came around this corner and went back, she saw George Anthony holding Kaylee in his arms. She immediately grabbed Kaylee and began to cry and cry and cry. And shortly thereafter, George began to yell at her, "Look what you've done! Your mother will never forgive you, and you will go to jail for child neglect for the rest of your freaking life."
Oh boy, we're going to hear from the prosecution in just a minute, but first, Ryan, what do you make of the defense claim that Kaylee drowned in the family swimming pool?
Well, I got to tell you, Drew, it was such a surprise when I heard it. There had been talk and speculation over the last few days that might be a theory they'd offered, but our thought was always, hey, why didn't they say this a couple of years ago when they first started looking at Casey Anthony as a suspect? But this allegation puts reasonable doubt in the front and center. And that's because before this, we heard the prosecution's opening statement, and it looked like the cards were stacked against Casey. When you look at it as an accident, well, that takes premeditated murder off the table. It takes possible child neglect off the table. It cleans the slate. And I think it makes it so that the jury can look at this and say, the prosecution has their story, the defense has their story. Drew, I still think there are a lot of holes in the story that Jose Baez is offering, such as what happened to the body after supposedly George was complicit in Kaylee's, after Kaylee drowned and George found her in that pool. They've got to answer those questions, but it was such a shock to hear it in court today.
And Gene, do you think the prosecution was able to make the case convincingly that Casey's just a liar and that this stuff has got giant holes in it, like as Ryan is saying?
Well, here's the thing that the prosecution addressed that the defense did not address. Somebody did searches on the family computer in March of that year, 3 months before little Kaylee went missing or was drowned in the pool, and they were chloroform, how to make chloroform, how to make household weapons, neck breaking, and a shovel. Those were searches done in the home.
That's bizarre stuff, Allison. Isn't it bizarre? How do we put all this stuff together? Plus, there was the tape over the child's mouth and all these other incidental findings that just don't fit together.
See, this is very problematic from the of course it's problematic, but what her defense attorney did today and did very well is say, wait a minute, because the prosecution has the burden of proof here. They've got to show beyond a reasonable doubt that she murdered her daughter.
Yeah.
The defense doesn't have to put on any evidence at all. So the fact that you haven't heard from them for 3 years, you don't have to. This is their day in court. This is the day, and they are the ones that are going to say, wait a minute, this isn't a case where she killed her daughter. This was an accident. We didn't have to tell you about it until now. They do have problems. They've got big problems. They've got the chloroform. They've got the tape over the mouth. They've got the Google search. They've got the statement that her mother made. Smells like a dead body in the car. Those are major problems.
Although a lot of people have been saying that Casey was doing a lot of drugs, and if I heard a drug addict was looking up chloroform and shovels and things, I would think it'd have something to do with their drug history, not about murder.
And maybe he should be listening, because that's one way to explain away the. But that's pretty specific, and that's tough stuff.
Net breaking doesn't sort of fit with that. Jean, do you agree with that? Do you think that this stuff is difficult for them to explain away?
No, I think there's a lot that is difficult for them to explain away. The car that Casey Anthony had control and possession of, we're going to hear chloroform levels that were very, very high in that car, higher than a decomposing body emits. How do you explain that? The defense will explain it as being junk science, but that's tough. And the hair. There's a hair in the trunk that has decomposition root banding on the end of it.
And Jean, let me also ask you, George looked a little bit sort of circumspect today under the examination by the defense. Did you agree with that hit, or did he think he held up well?
Go ahead.
I'll take that. I think he did hold up well, Drew, and I think this is tough questioning to face. There were a couple things that really stood out to me. The first is when he was asked point blank if he had anything to do with this, he said no, and he said, and I was really upset about that allegation. And you could see the hurt in his face about his daughter making that accusation. I think that really resonated with the jury. I also think he was very straightforward in his answers. A lot of times you'll see people on the stand, and when they've got something to do with it, they're hedging a little bit. They're kind of shifting a little bit. He didn't do any of that. He was very straightforward and very resolute in the fact that he knew nothing about this.
Right, and he was very stoic in the courtroom, too, but the judge had said that if he saw any emotion out of the parents, if they said anything, that they would be ejected from the courtroom, so that's one reason maybe why he just saw a blank face when those allegations came up.
Interesting stuff. Jean, thank you for joining us. Ryan, you're going to stay with us. Now, the prosecution, as is Allison, the prosecution portrayed Casey as a murderer and a liar, and she went for a month without telling anyone that Kaylee was missing. Look at this.
No one but Casey Anthony had access to all the pieces of evidence in this case. The duct tape, the laundry bag, the blanket, the shorts, the shirt, the car. No one else lied to their friends, to their family, to investigators. No one else benefited from the death of Kaylee Marie Anthony. Kaylee's death allowed Casey Anthony to live the good life, at least for those 31 days.
Well, whatever the verdict may be in this case, as I've said, it is compelling, it is disturbing, and we've just barely scratched the surface.